Nick Cranmer.
John Chillery.
What's up, babe?
Not much, babe. How you doing?
So good. So happy you made it up here.
I know. It's not that bad of a drive.
Where are you coming from?
San Diego.
What part of San Diego?
Claremont.
Okay.
Bay Park. You
Oh,
know.
yeah,
You
dude.
know.
We live there together. So sick.
Yeah.
That's a full circle thing, which is kind of insane because I feel like our paths have gone like that, and now we're finally working together, which is really, really cool.
Yeah. I was actually, when I was driving up here, I was thinking the first time I met you was on a road trip with Jeff's brother, who I'm close with.
Mm-hmm.
And we were driving across country, and Jeff called us, and he's like, "Hey, I'm with a bunch of my college buddies in Las Vegas." And then that's when I met you for the first time.
That was the first time when we were that big. It was like 40 people.
A lot of people.
That was a gnarly trip. That
Yeah.
was so much fun.
Yeah,
That was a lot of fun.
it was. A long time
was
ago,
like-
too.
13 years ago,
Yeah.
which is crazy.
Yeah,
Something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe 14.
yeah. And then I like, every once in a while, you'd pop in, say hello,
Do a quick popper.
do a little popper, and then, And then I think you moved to San Diego in 2015, 16 or something?
End of 2014.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when we started Whiteboard. We didn't really get like our feet wet for like a year
Because it takes a long time.
Well, that and our entire business model like was around Bizisher,
Yeah.
and then we got blocked from that from Jeff and Dallas's former agency, and so like our massive business plan that was like took a ton of time, like we just crumpled up and had to like start fresh. So like thankfully, Jeff, Dallas, and I knew that we could go like right business. So it's not like we went from like, working in a restaurant to now starting an insurance agency. We're like, all right, well, the bread and butter of most insurance agencies, like, do you have folks that have the ability to bring in business? Mm-hmm. And so we all knew we could do that. It's just figuring out the back end architecture of how that all works. And we made every single mistake along the way. Thankfully, we finally hit our stride, probably like a year and a half in. And now this is our 9th year, which is also insane.
Yeah.
So it happened really quickly. You're the first guy that we've brought on who's ever been a broker before. So like our brokers like have always been homegrown. We don't, is O'Neill our only one? Yeah. So like we haven't had many. Like Adam came through, Adam Joyce. He did really good, but he's off to an underwriter now. But you're the first that have come from like another retail agency over here. And so I want to like explore your experience like first before we get into that. Kind of your background, like
Sure.
where you come from, like what you always thought you were going to do. Like I know your dad was in the business. He's out 100%.
He's retired. Yep.
100% out, but he's in the business for like 30, 40 years.
Yeah. As long as basically he started when I was born, and he retired, I believe, in 2020. So I'm 38, almost 39.
That's a long time.
March 2nd, coming up here pretty quick. So yeah, he was in the industry till I was 36.
Was he at Alliant the whole time?
So he started as a underwriter,
Okay.
and when he applied for the job, my grandpa's like, "Hey, how did that job interview go?" And he's like, "Oh, the overriding like job interview went really well." So he didn't even know the name, and that was something that we'd always laugh about.
Yeah.
So he kind of got thrown into it. Thrown into it by my grandpa. He's like, "Hey, you graduated college. Like, let's get you going on your career."
Yeah.
So he started up in LA, and he hated it. He hated being an underwriter. I think it was a really like what he explains is it was like kind of a weird time in his life. But then he started becoming super close with these not underwriters, but brokers down in San Diego. And they were like, "Hey, why don't you come and start working with us?" And ever since then, he stayed at Alliant. And it was
So
before that,
he went
before
from an underwriter and directly to Alliant.
So before it was Alliant, it was called Robert F. Driver.
Okay.
And the Robert F. Driver, actual person, but that whole family, I think, was like a huge, like the main Robert F. Driver, Bob Driver, was a huge part of my dad's success. And then also the people around him, and that's an and we'll probably jump into that a little bit more, but like I kind of felt like when my dad explained like his group of people that were all relatively around his age, that propelled him to like the levels that he got to.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that I noticed, probably at other jobs that I, maybe some areas it was there, but then I've just seen and I feel the energy with Whiteboard in before, like just seeing how you guys grew, like the energy was there and you guys were propelling to the levels that like I wanted to get to, and where I saw I needed to get to.
Yeah.
So, so there's a lot of like interesting parallels with like thinking about my dad's life and actually, when I was like 12, I mean, when you're 12, you're like, oh, I want to be a baseball player or whatever sport you're playing.
Yeah.
And I was playing catch with my dad because baseball was my sport. And I was like, we were playing catch, just having like after school, just hanging out. And I was like, you know what, Dad, like your life is pretty freaking amazing. I was like, I would sign a contract for your life right now.
That's it.
At 12, 13, pretty young. So I knew like, all right, like I'll play out the whole sports stuff as long as I can, and like jump into insurance because it seemed like a great industry. Everyone that I met that my dad worked with, were just great people. And I actually even got to work with a ton of them before moving over to Whiteboard. And that was a really cool experience. So like just the industry, the people, and my dad was a very liked person. So would get rave reviews. Like everyone would,
Your dad's awesome.
Yeah, my dad's he's a very cool, great personality, fun to be around.
For sure.
And that's part of his success. Like I think he like in the first like 17 or 12 months, like he wrote, I think the most accounts or most business, brought in the most revenue. Whoa. For someone his age and for Robert F. Driver. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that, but he did really, really well in the beginning and then just excelled. And
That's
just
awesome.
he was a grinder and totally different. I think, insurance world back in, late 80s, early 90s, totally different ball game than what it is now. So
it's very different now. I mean, obviously it wasn't around back then, but like I worked with like my old owners of the agencies and they're like, hey, you have no clue what it was like limited markets, like the whole quoting thing, like quoting actually was a good way to get business back then.
Yeah.
It was the only way you got business back then because you only controlled limited markets. And I'm sure the whole underwriting process, I mean, I talked to Dan Sergi, who was the owner of my first agency I was at, and he literally told me, he's like, oh, we would do deals on napkins, like getting drunk and doing deals on napkins.
Yeah.
Which is a legitimate deal. And I was like, that's insane that was happening, like with someone that is alive right now, that could still be going on. So it's changed quite a bit. So you graduated college. Did you immediately get insurance?
Pretty much.
Okay, what's that story?
So yeah, graduated USD, University of San Diego, and I kind of went to my dad. I'm like, hey, who do you know in the industry? Like, what do you recommend the path? And I always knew that I wanted to go into like the agent broker side.
Yeah,
because that's what my dad did, and I was like, that sounds like a sweet life and opportunity. So he's like, why don't you check out something kind of more in the middle? He's like, why don't you try out wholesaling, which is essentially, kind of, I mean, you're a wholesale broker, but then you have the ability to kind of see what the underwriting side is like.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really, really good way for me to.
That's really smart.
To learn, just both sides and have like appreciation for what underwriting kind of is like.
Which me, Jeff, and Dallas don't. Like
but I mean, there are some like pros and cons because then you understand like the servicing aspect, the behind the scenes stuff, and you learn how to do that. I got good at it. So you're like, I kind of get into that position where I don't like to maybe not lean on people, but I don't want to inconvenience them. So I'm like, you know what, I'll just take it all in.
Yeah.
And I'll do it myself. And then you forget about what you're supposed to be doing. It's like, what's going out and finding new clients and new relationships. So I started out as a wholesaler, did like basic stuff. I think like one of the first accounts that I wrote was like a residential janitorial risk. Like
Yeah.
it was a general liability policy. And I think it was $901.
Sure.
I was like, I could write a ton of these. Like
Yeah.
this would be, I'll just write all these small accounts
Yeah.
and I'll, be, on my way. But it was really interesting and just like learning like, all the questions that underwriters need to ask or need to receive to offer a proposal. So learning all the ins and outs. Like I didn't even know what a subcontractor was or like the difference in how important it is from like residential to commercial to industrial, the height exposures. Are you doing a wrap? Like, so learning all the stuff that, that you need to ask so you can get quick turnaround.
That's really important. You had that kind of foundation.
Yeah.
I had something similar where I was at is I was doing a program business through Hanover. So a affinity program.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know shit about insurance. So I was in a position where I knew I could go sell. I was good at that. I've kind of done that like my whole life in some capacity. But I didn't know anything about insurance. But I got a foundation from like the risk manager at CCA. Her name's Brenda Prindeville. She's like, a lot of folks like found her super difficult to work with, but like for me, she took me under her wing and like told me how like commercial insurance works and what all the coverages are. And it was like the most invaluable like time in my life where I felt like constant information coming in. I was just absorbing it. And then I could look at any policy and I know exactly what stuff was. Like Dan Sergi, the owner of my agency, asked him like, how do I learn insurance? Like you can't learn insurance. It's so broad and so deep that like people can spend their whole lifetime learning about one section of insurance and just know that backwards and forwards. But it's so broad, and he's like, the best thing you can do is like, here's 10 policies to go through for like 10 different accounts. Read them. Because they're contracts. They're legal contracts.
Yeah, which is not easy to do.
Not easy to do.
Yeah,
so
it's
once you start
confusing.
seeing, oh, you have this limit here, but it's like subject to this exclusion or this endorsement, and you think an endorsement's a good thing, but you get something like the protective safeguards endorsement that actually removes coverage if they don't have stuff. You're like, well, that's not an endorsement. That's an exclusion that they just titled an endorsement.
Yeah.
And so it's those type of things to actually have folks around you that can come in and mentor you and say, no, this is actually how it works, was super valuable. So the fact that you got to go through that and know what the underwriters are looking for, know what questions need to be answered, probably served you a ton moving over to the retail side. So like what caused that change?
That was just like the progression that I knew that I wanted to do, but
So
I
that
ended up actually liking wholesaling a lot, and partially because I worked for an awesome company called Arrowhead Wholesale Insurance, and some of the coolest and most memorable people that I think it just, when I look back, that was such a cool place because it was just like my bosses to the people that were kind of where I was in life with like their career and profession, super close. And that was probably like the best way. Like if I would have started like in a very corporate lifestyle or role or company, I think that would have just took me the other way.
For sure. I think it's a lot of people. I think some people do enjoy like the big corporation because there's a structure to it. They're like, all right, I know if I just put in my time, do my stuff, get good grades from my managers, like I'm going to work my way up, get my like 3 to 8% raise every single year. And like 10 years, I'll be making $100,000, and you know what that is. And on the flip side of that, like working at a smaller organization, probably like Arrowhead was at that time, like you do have some camaraderie there, and it's like, it's less about climbing the ladder and more about being valuable.
Yeah.
Which coming from like our side is like, I don't give a shit if someone has a college degree. I don't care about any of that. It's like, well, what skill set do you come with, and can that be utilized in the business? And does that map up with what you want to be doing? Mm-hmm. Right? If you're coming to a job every single day and you're good at it, but you don't like it, it's not good for anybody. Like, yeah, we'll get like value out of that because you're providing a service to the company and you're getting compensated for that. But it's not the goal. The goal is to find like that marriage between what you are good at and what you enjoy, and putting those together, if you can get someone in that pocket, like everything changes.
Yeah.
It's like perfect.
Yeah.
So you went into wholesaling knowing that you would become a retail broker at some point. How did you know when it was time to make that switch, and where did you go?
I think I was, so at Arrowhead Wholesale, I was there for probably 4.5, 5 years. And I just kind of felt like it was time. Like I felt like I was comfortable with just coverages enough to make that leap.
Yep.
And then randomly started just connecting with this one lady that was super close to Arrowhead Wholesale, their office, and made the leap with another guy, Mike Gilbo, who you've met, and then just started there. And it was a quick tenure at this one agency, but then I went over to Snap and Associates, where I started working with Jeff Dow, and then met Dallas.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, going back,
Jeff and Dallas were there before you?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought you were there before them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Jeff graduated, and then I don't know. I feel like I think I connected Jeff to Snap or mentioned about them.
Yeah.
And I mentioned like, hey, this is a place that I'm considering, moving to, and then met Dallas that way, and I had a blast with them.
Yeah.
So, but we had tough times. Like we were grinding. We were trying to.
You guys were all in the same boat together, right? Came in at a very similar time. I think Dallas started in marketing, Jeff started in marketing, and then Dallas went to be a broker, and Jeff was still in marketing, and then, right? You guys all come up.
So I didn't do the marketing side, but that's how they would typically hire someone.
Yep.
And then bring them to become an agent or
Did
broker.
you start immediately as a broker?
As a broker, yeah.
Okay. So you were hired as a broker.
Hired as a broker.
How long were you there for?
I think another 5 years.
Okay.
Another 5 years, and then with kind of like in the back of my head, I'm like, all right, going back to like signing a contract for my dad's life, I wanted to see what it would like to be at a large shop.
Yep.
Large insurance agency. So I think
you went to like the biggest Alliance, like I think number like 4.
They're top 10. I mean, they're a force. And very reputable insurance agency, and they've grown and acquired, and that's like the name of the game with like the big insurance agencies.
That's going to come to an end. It has to. Like there's not a ton of agencies like starting up like we do. Like I think I met a couple in the past 10 years, and I don't hear about a ton of them.
Yeah.
And so all these large, or Gallagher Marsh, like they're all just acquiring business, just inorganic growth, which does have its limits. And as soon as like you hear this all the time from like Gallagher clients, is like, oh, I was working with Peter at ABC, and then they were bought by Gallagher, and I have like a new person served, and the service level goes down dramatically because now maybe you're a $10,000 revenue account, which was good for the small agency, but you're in small business for Gallagher now, so you like lose the love.
Yeah.
And so like that is an unsustainable business model, and it's weird that people keep pouring into that, given the amount of like, because we've been approached a few times to get bought, and the multiples that is getting thrown is like 11, 12x, which is really attractive. But at the end of the day, like especially in California, it doesn't matter. Like, so let's say you have a $10 million revenue book, and you have 10 brokers doing that. If any of those brokers leave in California, they can essentially take their book with them. Like, you're going to get a nasty letter from your insurance or your previous employer saying that hey, shouldn't be doing this, but they can't do anything. It's a right to work state. So these multiples that are getting thrown out are very, very strange. Because like you're betting a 12 years, right, that I got to recoup my money before I start making money on this. And assuming none of those brokers take their book with them, there's no attrition in the book, like rates don't go down. It seems like a weird gamble, and I haven't figured out. I think maybe because interest rates are so low.
Money was cheap. I think that was like the name of the game back in like 2009. I think when I really, so I was at a line from 2017 to 21.
Yep.
And I want to say 2018, like you would get these emails like, hey, Alliant just acquired XYZ company or insurance agency, and you know what, okay, that's awesome, cool. But then it just was like bam, 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 like
Saw a
one
bunch of
after
them
the
come
other. And I think you're right. I mean, money was cheap, and they could throw out those crazy numbers, and then play the long game, and they know that they're going to make money off of this agency at some point. But 11x, that's pretty crazy, especially
crazy.
if like you have a broker that leaves.
Yeah, one of your heavy hitters, like, I'm gonna go start my own thing, or I'm gonna go to this other agency because they're giving me like 10% more on my book. Which someone who's got $1 million book, that's another $100,000 in their pocket.
Yeah,
like it makes sense to do. So I think they'll slow down for sure. I guess that transition from Snap and Alliant, what was that like moving from like, because Snap is not a big agency. They're not
they're
small.
like, I think when I was there, maybe like 50, 60, something like that.
And they're gone now, right? They sold.
They sold
to Alchemy.
Yes. And I don't know if the name changed or what happened with that. But
they, I think, maintain their name. It's like similar to Acrisure. Like it's like they're going to be Snap and Associates powered by Alchemy.
Okay.
I think it is. The guy from Alchemy, he approached us as well. Curtis Barton, he's awesome. Like we got approached by Acrisure too, and they're like a monolith. They're gigantic. So like we walk them through like what we do. And they're like, cool. But like Alchemy took the time to get to know us, like understood the value that we brought because they don't have anything like what we have from the work comp side of things. So they saw like strategic value in that. But the fact that like their CEO came in, spent time with us, I was like, oh, and he like him and a few guys like who had their own retail agencies, like all banded together. And that's how they started Alchemy. Acrisure, Greg Williams was not an insurance guy at all. He just he looked at like insurance as like, oh, this is good reoccurring revenue. And so he looked at it from a completely different landscape. So the Alchemy guys, I don't know if they'll ever get to Acrisure's level just because of like where Acrisure hit in the market. But the way they're doing it, like bringing on strategic partners who have niches, seems to be a much smarter way to do that. Like I think their agencies will grow way more significantly organically than like their inorganic growth through acquisitions. It seems like they're being more strategic.
Yeah.
So that experience going from Snap and Associates, which is like a small to mid-size regional, to one of the major players, what was like the big difference between those two?
I mean, so Snap, great agency, had a great time there. Learned a lot. They set me up with a mentor. Tim Hampton was probably another like huge key moment of just learning the insurance industry and like breaking down policies and like even reading a paragraph and talking about it for an hour.
Yeah.
Great experience there. And then making that switch. I always, when I worked at Snap, if I was competing against an Alliant or another large name agency, I'd be like, oh crap, like I can't compete. We're screwed. Like there's nothing that we can do. But in the reality, and I think you actually put this in you kind of explained it perfectly. They're just a larger boutique shop. They've just acquired, and I didn't like, even though I'm sure Alliant through the acquisitions of these other insurance agencies and stuff like that, there's probably a lot of things that a lot of Alliant brokers don't even know that they have access to and resources. But I felt like what I could provide to, bigger client was very similar to what Snap could offer, if not even maybe even less. But this, I mean, the servicing, like the people that I worked with, like they worked their tails off, and like there's a lady, April Hall, that worked with my dad for 35 plus years. Like she worked so hard, and she was an amazing person to work with. But comparing the two, there wasn't a whole lot of difference between just servicing.
Yeah.
So
still write insurance, servicing it, make sure that everybody has what they need. Like it's the same game, just at a different scale.
Different scale. Maybe a little bit more clout. Like maybe people would oh, I know Alliant.
Yeah,
but that wouldn't like close or sell deals.
So I talked to which is true for sure. My buddy Tucker at Marsh, he's on the benefit side of things. Like I get meetings because we're Marsh. which like everybody knows Marsh. And in the large group where he plays is like they're the best in the business.
Okay.
Like Marsh is really, really good at what they do. So there is some benefit of building that brand and having people know, like, I've heard of Marsh or I've heard of Alliant, like they're legit. And for a lot of these large organizations is they don't take shots on like smaller agencies because like either if they're publicly traded, they have shareholders to answer to. And so if there's any, like they have a fiduciary responsibility, like, hey, we're going to go get the best in the business. Mm-hmm. And so it's not like the thought process and like who are we actually working with as an individual level. It's we're working with the best, the biggest in the world.
Yeah.
Like what
are the names? Like, yeah, let's keep to the names that we know.
For sure. The household names. And so that for us is like, because that's the market we want to play in. Like we want to play with,
and we can,
and we can,
and
so
we
that's
do.
The cool part about it. It's like it's twofold. One is like we get to go to a company that maybe generates $100,000 in revenue, so over $1 million policy. Who Gallagher, Marsh, Aon, Lockton, all those folks want that account. Those are like perfect accounts for them, and they have some of the resources that we have. And so to throw our hat in the ring with like 30 employees is like a very different approach for a lot of these companies because they don't. Like when they get hit up by, you know, a smaller agency asking to quote, it's not a question. So we're coming in not to quote, to solve a problem that they have. Mm-hmm. And because we have something that is wholly unique in the marketplace, like we actually do compete and win against these large agencies, which is super exciting. So this next year is we're targeting the largest 7,000 employers in California. And like, that's who we're going after.
Sweet.
That's who we can serve most effectively. That typically is who appreciates what we do. Their spend is usually like 10x of anybody else. And so the delta that we get to save from where they're at, where they could be, is like hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know, if not millions. So it's really cool to be able to compete in that space. For you, recognizing that, you know, it's the same game as like Snap and Alliant. They're just kind of, the scale's different. What made the decision, because we tried to pull you over a couple times, what made the decision for you from moving to Alliant to like Whiteboard?
I mean, a few things. I mean, kind of realizing like, okay, I'm playing the same game as I did at Snap. Growth was similar. And you know, I mean, watching you guys progress, the success that you were having, the changes that you were making, being able to do something unique and different, and like truthfully, like when I call people, do cold calling, like I have so much of a higher confidence level just on the phone, just knowing what we can provide than maybe when I was at Alliant. You know, it was more of like the traditional, you know, cold call, like, all right, my value is going to be like trying to find a market that someone has not approached. And that game gets old and you lose that game. So, you know, and then, you know, another thing too is like you guys we have a, you know, a non-professional relationship, and I want to work with people that are the same age as me, same like wants and needs in professional life. And that was just a very attractive thing. And I just knew that you guys were hitting the strides that I wanted to do as well. Yeah. And now like I feel like I'm doing that with you guys, and it feels great. This is probably the most rewarding, like I think 12, 14 months that I've had in the insurance, like my profession.
Fuck yeah.
So,
my language.
And that feels really good to say, because, you know, there's a lot of times where, you know, you go through those struggles and you're like, man, I don't feel like where am I bringing value? How am I trying to be different? And, you know, it's tough to do that unless you're just like some, you know, wizard. But like you guys have made things very set up in a way where, you know, you learn the process and it makes sense and you see the value and you're like, all right, I get it. And now you can go and talk to these people, and like in the majority, confidently. Yeah. And people see it. They feel it, and they're like, all right, this is different. And they take your call. So you have more opportunities to just talk to prospects and people and really help them too. Like it feels good when you're like, man, like I know I'm going to set this company up, and it feels good that I'm going to be able, like this, I'm going to be a huge factor in their business.
Yeah.
So that's super cool.
It's super rewarding. That's like, I I kind of crap on insurance quite a bit. It's like, it's not my passion is insurance, but one of the things that I often overlook, and then if I take just a couple step back and like recognize that like we really are helping companies, tooting our own horn pretty hard, but it feels good to be able to say like, hey, like you're paying $300,000, you're now paying $100,000.
Yeah.
Obviously took a little bit of time and effort to get there, but to be able to educate folks on here's how work comp actually works. Here's your uninsurable liability with your X mod. Like, as long as you are educated, like that's what we want, which is like a weird thing. I feel like a lot of folks in sales is like, they don't want their buyers to be educated. And the reason why is they have opportunity for manipulation, to play in the gray a little bit. And that doesn't serve us. What serves us is to being like radically transparent, educating them on exactly how the system works. And once they understand that and then see the platform that we've built, they're not getting sold anymore. They're coming to a place where like, I need this. Like now that I understand how it works, I need something that will actually solve this problem that I have.
Exactly. And I think when you are fully transparent, like you were saying, the conversation changes. Because when people know, like if you're not trying to educate them, you're like keeping your cards close to your chest, like they're going to feel that. So they're going to keep their cards close to their chest. And then it's just like this ongoing, like, it's a very uncomfortable, like awkward, like, I don't want to even want to talk to these. Like, I don't feel like neither party or side wants to talk to each other.
Yep.
But exact opposite. Like when you go through, our webinars, our like first, meetings or in person or whatever, or, just our full process, like, I feel like the conversation and openness is so something that I've never experienced before.
Yeah.
And it's so cool because they value you differently than, you're not in the sales bucket anymore. You're literally like a consultant, which you're hoping to always be and want to be for someone. You're in like where the attorneys or the accountants are.
Yep.
And that's like, that's where you want to play.
For sure.
And that's what you want to bring. So, and you have to earn it. You have to earn it to get to that, into that bucket. So, and I think our process does that.
It is a cool part about our process. One of the things I'll tell a prospect, if I'm making a cold call, I'm like, hey, I understand you have a great relationship with your broker. You've had it for 20 years. What I can tell you is that if you sit down with me for an hour, you will be more educated on how work comp works than your broker who's been doing this for 30 years.
Sure. Or maybe they know it, but they haven't been able to explain it properly and explain why it's so important.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of the stuff that, our process and when I first came on, I'm like, okay, I know all these like terms, I know the significance, but like actually, explaining it properly through a meeting to, someone that, a business owner, it's not always easy to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we have not done, your unique situation, because like we knew you, we had a relationship outside of a professional relationship, which is, I'm so thankful you took a chance on us. That's amazing. But like we've kicked around the idea of bringing brokers from agencies that have books, like bring them over here and then teach them our system. And one of the things that always like freaks us out about it, it's like difficult to teach an old dog a new trick. It's even more difficult sometimes is to have them unlearn the things that they're used to doing.
Yeah.
Right. So that is a big challenge. That's like why we have a junior broker training program. I was like, hey, if you're not jaded and have all these bad habits built in, from your previous agencies, it makes it a lot easier for us to just build on a blank slate. How would you, if you were talking to another like broker who is at like a Marsh or a Gallagher or even like a smaller agency, like what would be something that you would say to them or to like let them know how this is different?
So you're saying like how we
like
kind of define roles, like how we are so like very defined on like, hey, this is all that you need to do. This is all you have to care about. Is that what you're saying? No,
more like for that, because there's fear moving, right? There's like a big, like if you are in a good spot, that's the problem with being in a good spot. Like you think it's good, but there's a whole universe of things that could be better, more dynamic, anything like that. So most brokers don't jump ship very often. They usually find an agency, they have an attractive commission split, and they're like, all right, well, I'm going to go do, $50,000 to $100,000 in new business a year, and that's what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do it over the next 10 years. I'm going to have a $500,000 to $1 million book, and I'm going to cruise. So I guess my question, to be more succinct, is if you were talking to a broker at Marsh, Alliant, Gallagher, like, why would you encourage them to make the switch?
Okay. I mean, other than the fact that I think like a big in a shop like that, it's hard to pivot. It's hard to like be, when new stuff comes out or, if there's changes, I feel like Whiteboard is able to pivot quicker and provide what is needed. When, in 2024, there could be some new stuff that comes out. We're going to be on it. I think we'll be able to attack that differently than a Marsh where it's going to be a lot slower.
For sure.
Or a big agency like that. So I feel like we're constantly changing. We're adding stuff, we're removing stuff, we're trying to tweak things out. Yep. And sometimes there's some growing pains with that.
For sure.
But I think we hone in and then all of a sudden it's like to the races.
Yeah.
So I think I really like that. And then there's going to be people that are, cush and they're happy where they are and it doesn't make sense for them to switch. But I would say like for the people that, feel like they could be doing more or they feel like they're kind of pounding their head into the wall over and over and they just haven't found like the process. I think it's so cool and so like relieving when I can use you as a resource or anyone in the company and you guys like just genuinely want to see us succeed.
Yeah.
And it's more than professional too.
For sure.
There's the personal side and it's like kind of like all encompassing and like it all has to flow together and I can feel that from you. Like you check in with me. We have pretty deep conversations and I have that with everyone at work. And I think that's a really cool feeling. So it's like, that's another reason why I love like the small business feel. Like the large insurance agency like is great for some people, but I love like the small feel, but I feel like this is going to become way bigger than probably I even expect.
I hope so.
Yeah. So I really believe in, I think, and there's just such good energy. This is a place like, you can get insurance. Like, it's like, okay, this is my profession. Like where's the good? Like, where can I feel satisfied? Like, compared to maybe someone that's, a vet or something like where you get a ton of gratification from saving a life. Like this is the first time where I feel like I have like maybe not at a vet level, but like still very high gratification and it feels good. I honestly enjoy every day that I work here.
That's so cool, man. I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
One more thing I want to touch on, and I asked O'Neill on our last podcast, like about the company culture, and you've hit on it a little bit, but like, and you've talked about like the professional and the personal side of things. Like I've said this for a while, like we're not, and this gets thrashed all over on like LinkedIn, but like we're not building like a company. Like we are a company, but we're trying to build like a group of individuals that come together to see a higher vision than just making money.
Yeah.
And that like is a very difficult thing because I never thought about that. Like at my previous agencies, like I know what the owners are in this for. They want me to succeed because that means money for them, which is true. It's like a mutual alignment. If you succeed, like we succeed. But from a culture perspective, you kind of hit on as like we're not looking just to do that. Like the money should be a byproduct of actually building a strong team.
Mm-hmm.
So can you touch on like the culture shift from like even Snap to Alliant to here and what that might be?
Well, I think like first thing that I notice is like I'm one of the oldest people at the insurance agency at Whiteboard. So you've got like just young people that are starting their careers and they're working hard and they're doing a really good job. And just working with people just in the same chapter of their life is super fun. And like going back to Alliant, like April Hall, she's been in the industry for 35 plus years. She's in a different part of her professional career, but she was there for me from thick and thin. But she's her kind of goals in 2020 are a little bit different than mine.
For sure.
So it's really cool to be on the same path, same chapter in life. And And yeah, insurance is kind of like it's an older industry, like older, everyone's, typically older, it feels like. And I feel like just being with a bunch of younger guys, and like, we went to Mammoth and we did a retreat to kind of bond and be together. We do a lot of stuff outside of work that isn't typical, in corporate world, because, there's, employment practices, and they have way more, things that they have to be careful with. But it's like kind of going back to like what you'd probably hope and dream, to have, like when you're in your, your real career, you're with people that you can go to Mammoth with, or go to Palm Springs, or go down to Baja and go play a round of golf for the weekend and stuff like that. Yeah, machaca. Hitting the ball in the machaca.
Yeah, for sure.
So I love that. And it just feels like very well-rounded. Like my life is very well-rounded right now.
Beautiful.
So
we're lucky to be a part of it, man.
Yeah.
I'm very
likewise
honored and blessed to, call you a friend, and I'm very happy you decided to make the decision to come on board, babe.
Right. Yeah.
Thanks for taking time to do this, Nick.
Yeah.
Appreciate you,
man.
Doug.
No, this is fun.
We out.
Do we clap?
Close.